So the first thing I'm going to do, this one is the 8-piece model. So when I pull it out, I've got a brain stem. There's also a brain stem in the cabinet. So what's our first part?
Right and left frontal lobe.
Okay, it's easier to show on the color-coded one. It's only color-coded on one side. So you go from the front of the head, right here, and you can see how big they are. They go that far back. More than halfway. And they don't match perfectly. Nobody does. And these are all taken from one woman's head. And that's her face right there.
So is this the
same person.
frontal?
And that's the left side. Yeah. This is the right.
Right and left central sulcus.
Okay, you're only going to notice the left. That's it. That's what those two colors are showing. They're right in between that sulcus. And it does not match up perfectly on this side. It's already jagged. It's in the wrong place because nobody's symmetric.
Right and left temporal lobe.
So the temporals are down here. You left out a part.
Right and left lateral sulcus.
That's okay. So the lateral sulcus is what I just lifted.
Okay.
And then that separates the temporal from everything else. And then your parietal lobes are where this purple starts up here. And then the occipital are way in the back. And vision's back here. And look, I have a cerebellum too. It's a cerebellum right there.
And then we just did, you said temporal, and then occipital.
Mention those.
And then corpus callosum.
That bridge that they cut unites the two sides, so they cut it in half. And remember, that's a woman, so it's really thick.
And that's called
the corpus callosum.
And the arbor vitae.
So it's the white matter inside the cerebellum. So you can see the white matter, you can see the white matter, you can see the white matter. So that's all it.
What was that called?
Arbor vitae. Tree of life.
Tree of life.
Medulla oblongata.
I can show it over here. Is this narrow part right here. And when you're looking on this guy, it's going to be right here in between these two parts right there.
Middle cerebellar peduncle.
First, I'll show you from the cerebellum. So you can see kind of where this whitish part is. It almost makes like a musical note right there. But when you're looking at it on the brain stem, and only the right side is marked, has numbers. So that's the right middle cerebellar peduncle. The left's not numbered at all. You can see that white. So they will match perfectly when you put them in for the correct side. So that tells you if you put it in upside down or right side up. So that's part of the brain stem. And I can't do it on these because I can't get the cerebellum out of the way.
We did the middle, and then the right and the left, and then the corpora quadrigemina.
So the corpora quadrigemina, now it's your right, your left, because you're facing the same way it is. So where my fingernails are now, that's going to be the right and left superior colliculus, and now that's the inferior underneath. So you have the superior and inferior, either the right or the left. Okay.
And the cerebral aqueduct.
That's it right there. Either side.
The fourth ventricle.
That big part right there, and right behind it's going to be the cerebellum.
And the thalamus.
So the thalamus is this whole wall right here. So I'd flag it like right around the G right in there.
Intermediate mass.
That's that little piece that not everybody has, but this woman did, so all of our models do.
And then the right and left mammillary body.
So the mammillary bodies, and they're both numbered differently. So this one says an M, and this one I think was, I don't remember what the number is, but it's right there, that bulb. 48. And remember, the sheep only had one big one, and we have two. Thank you, 48.
And then the spinal cord.
So the spinal cord's at the very bottom here.
And the central canal.
So that's kind of where that line is right there going through it.
So would it be this?
It's a little tiny line. A little white line in there. It's a little depression.
Right and left cervical spinal nerve 1.
So cervical spinal nerve 1 is above my fingernail, and below that was 2.
Okay.
So if they're flipped up this way, remember two's on top, one's on the bottom, because the person's doing a headstand.
It's this
So
one.
literally, they start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So that-
And the olfactory bulb.
Wait a minute, you never did the hypothalamus. The
Oh,
hypothalamus
yeah.
is right there. So it's the anterior floor of the third ventricle's the space. Thalamus is the wall, the hypothalamus is that floor.
Okay.
Now, the olfactory bulbs are where the 28's written on both of those, and then the track goes straight back.
And the optic nerve, right and left optic nerve.
So your optic nerves are above my fingers right there.
Oh.
And 30, is it number 30, I think, on that one?
Mm-hmm.
And that should be the right, so the right side's numbered on this guy too.
And then we have the right and left oculomotor.
Okay, so when they're sitting here, they're going to be side by side. And now, let me hold this a different way. This is the pons. We skipped that too. So the pons is that big bulge. Like the sheep, it's more curved, a slider. But our head's drawn back too, which helps push it forward. And on top of it is where the next two come. So this pair right there, and when I open them, you can see the one that's numbered on the right. The right one has the number on it, the left doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So when I bring them together, you can see how close they actually are to each other. So they're literally side by side. And then coming from behind them, and the numbers down here for these guys come starting way in the back, and it'll go forward all the way there, and they're going to pass through the superior orbital fissure together. But these are done to scale, so this is really thin compared to the oculomotor. This is the trochlear nerve. But it's from the back of the head, not the front. And you're on top of the pons. You're above it. As you come with that one, and you're above it when you're here with these two. The pons is down there. And then the next one,
Trigeminal.
and that's the big thick one. And it's in the middle of the pons, both front to back and top to bottom. So when I get my finger out of the way, you can see it. That big stump right there. Okay, that's
Nerve.
now we're going under the pons, and again they're back toward each other, not dead center, but they're coming back toward each other, but underneath the pons.
And the facial nerve.
I'm going to stay on this side that's numbered. You come back a little further, and there's the facial nerve, so we're coming still under the pons, but we're coming back. And then we get back to this thicker one way back here, and that's the vestibulocochlear nerve. And then we're done with the pons, and we drop down to the medulla oblongata. And this one is the right one. There's the other 8-piece model. These two numbers are inverted. So 38 should be on top of 39. So this one's right. The other who painted the other one messed up. So this is the glossopharyngeal. And right under it's the vagus. And then this thin little line, basically, just a little tiny line, is the accessory. And we'll see it better in this one when we get to him. Okay, and then you come back to the front. And these two right there are going to be the hypoglossal, left and right. So these three pass together through, remember the jugular vein? It has its own foramen, the jugular foramen. They pass through the jugular foramen along with the jugular vein, unless it's divided almost in half. Then they go on their side, and the vein goes on the other side. So that's how they get back up to the head, or out of the head where
Do
they're
you guys
going.
paint these yourselves?
No,
The superior sagittal sinus.
I know. Now, this one's not as dark. This one's better. So you can see that blue up there. That's the superior sagittal sinus. So this one that's underneath here is going to be the inferior sagittal sinus. This one that's straight right here is the
Medial.
Straight.
sinus. It's right there. And then in the back, about 1 inch on each side, again, your left or your right, is the transverse sinus, the same way in the skull, about 1 inch coming straight across, left or right. And then when you look at the blue, or the purple, whatever you want to call it, that S, that's a normal looking S, is going to be the right sigmoid, and the one that's backwards is the left sigmoid sinus. And that's how you're going to drain the blood back out of your head. Remember, a sinus is a thin-walled vein. It's formed by these dura extensions. The dura mater makes it, instead of a normal blood vessel.
And then the anterior spinal artery.
Or also called ventral, because it's in front of the spinal cord all the way down. The spinal cord's way in the bottom. And then the pituitary gland's always kind of rose-colored. We barely can see anything, but it's always rose-colored, and it's sitting down in its solitary, so you can cover it a little bit too.
The olfactory bulb.
It's only showing on the one side of the head, so just the right one way up there. And then the track comes straight out of it.
Right and left optic nerve.
So again, the right's the one with the number. It's wearing off, but it's there.
And then the oculomotor nerve.
You can barely see right here, and the number's kind of spread out, but it's that white part way up there. The other one's harder to see. And the trochlear nerve is now totally broken. I can tell where it's at, but forget it.
Nerve.
That's the big thick one, so this is the side that's numbered, and they're the 3 you need to add. So on the top one, that's going to be the ophthalmic, goes to the eye. Then the maxillary is in the middle, and the mandibular is going clear down to the mandible. So this is why I've called trigeminal, 3 branches coming out. Then we go back up here with the abducens. And then I prefer to come to this side that doesn't have the numbers. This one in front is the facial, the one back there is the vestibulocochlear. And then you come back over here where they're numbered, and you've got they're in order. The glossopharyngeal, the vagus, and then the accessory, and this side's where they numbered the accessory. You can see how thin it is. The vagus is the biggest of those 3 by diameter. And then the hypoglossals back up front. And the number's back there behind. It's on that one, but it's behind this one. So you should keep going over them, and remember, Monday's the test.